Hello. Hi. Ah, we are live. My name's Erin. I have Instagram here, I have Facebook here, and I have been receiving a lot of new. I just want to just briefly introduce myself, and I'm here today to talk about my story with healing my nervous system, and some information will come through with that for you as well, in ways to do your own self healing. And then at the end, I am going to give you a special offer. So if you want to stick around for that, great. If you're watching this later, I'd love for you to say hashtag replay. I always like to know who shows up. And if you're here watching live, just say hello. So my name's Erin. I've been a coach and a healer for many years now. I got started in 2010 with yoga, moved into energy healing. So I do theta healing, which is clearing blocks in your subconscious mind. It has been foundational in my healing process. And then later got into coaching. And I've been doing this as a business ever since and love what I do. I also lead retreats. We're going to Ireland next month and Bali in January of 2023. So, yeah, I love what I get to do in the world. But a little bit of my backstory and why I'm here talking about the nervous system. And maybe you've found me because I was talking about the nervous system. I'm really, really into helping myself. So, as a product of trauma, childhood trauma, I suffer from PTSD, childhood, CPTSD, which can stand for childhood PTSD. It can also stand for complex PTSD, and lots of issues in my childhood that I had to deal with, that I had to work through. As an adult, right? Not to mention trauma that happened to me as an adult as well. And I've done so many different things. I still do and really believe in shadow work, inner child work. These are all different things that I do with my clients, energy healing, what I call emotional empowerment, which is a really deep process of moving through these really scary feelings that we sometimes have, and so much more. But most recently, like within the last, I'd say 6 to 7, 8 months, I've been really diving into somatic experiencing, which is the work of Peter Levine, as well as nervous system healing and understanding, why we do what we do on a deeper level. Not from the mind, though. Like the psychology that I've studied, a lot of the things that I've studied has revolved around the mind and your mindset. And that can only get us so far, is what I believe now, because, the issues get stored within our body. The issues are in the tissues. So until we really address the body, we're going to continue to have issues. So, for instance, I know a lot of us, myself included, did the whole personal growth, personal development, reading all the books, taking all the courses and all the things. And oftentimes I'd be like, but I still feel like I'm not good enough. I still have these deep rooted core wounds that freaking drag me down from time to time. Not only that, as I got older, I started developing issues that really didn't make sense based on how I was taking care of myself physically, eating really well, working out, doing all the things. And yet my hormones and sleeping, I got plenty of sleep at night. I don't really, drink hardly ever. All the things I don't smoke, none of the things that harm you. So it didn't really make sense why I was struggling physically in the ways that I was, which was hormonal imbalance. I had thyroid issues and chronic fatigue. And it wasn't until I started learning about the body. I did read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, but I started learning about it before this book through somatic practicing with Peter Levine, and just doing my own investigation. It's like I was kind of getting these intuitive messages that I needed to focus more on my body. I needed to, you know, move some of this stuff through. Because again, those triggers, those issues, they live within our body. And until we move that energy, it stays within us. So let's just dive in a little bit to my story. So grew up in a volatile situation. It was just my mom and I, and she has alcohol problems and was pretty emotionally and verbally abusive. And so my day to day looked like I didn't know what was going to happen. I didn't know, was she in a good mood? And would I be, safe that day? Or would she just explode out of nowhere? Like there was no way of knowing how that was going to show up. And therefore my brain and my nervous system wired in such a way that we have to be hypervigilant. We have to be on the lookout for what might happen at all times. I also learned to fawn, which is people pleasing. Like when I wasn't sure, it was just like, get on our good side, do things perfectly, which developed perfectionism, do things perfectly so that you stay safe, right? So that you don't get punished. And on top of that, I developed fight or flight, right? My fight or flight switch, as I like to say, got turned on and never really turned off. And the fight or flight is just like where your nervous system and your brain just go into these hypervigilant states. They're constantly scanning the environment to see if there's any threat. In my case, it was a daily, like, again, not knowing what the volatile situation might be. And then the other trauma response is freeze, which I didn't experience that one probably as much as a child. That came later as an adult because of all the trauma. So then when I was in my 20s, I got into partying. And hi, Anna. Nice to see you. Let me just see if there's any comments here. Hello to everybody watching. I started partying a lot in my 20s because I was a very sensitive child. I'm a highly sensitive person. I'm an empath, and all that means is that my nervous system is already wired to be more sensitive than the average human. That affects about 20% of the population. It's not some like woo-woo term. Highly sensitive people exist, and it just means our nervous systems are more sensitive. So it was kind of like putting, I don't know, worst case scenario together. Putting a highly sensitive person in a daily kind of trauma situation just was a recipe for disaster. And so in my 20s, I got into drinking and partying because I wanted to shut all of that down as quickly as possible. And so I wouldn't have to feel. And that's kind of how I identified myself, was as this person that was sociable and fun loving and all of that, but it was because of the alcohol that I was that way and confident, right? So then in my late 20s, kind of worst case scenario happened because of partying. I'm not going to go into details here, but you can probably guess what that might be. So I had trauma all throughout my childhood, and then you add a big traumatic situation later in life, and that just spelled disaster. So it was after that traumatic situation, when I was about 29, that I started to notice fatigue pretty bad. And because I was still young, I was able to kind of manage it until about 35. And that's when things started to shut down. And because I wasn't changing, I was still putting tons of pressure on myself. I had to be perfect. I was people pleasing. I wasn't setting boundaries. I was doing all the things that totally, wreck you, wreck your energy. And so then I got diagnosed with adrenal fatigue. And then it wasn't until in my 40s, when I turned 40, I just shut down again. Like my body literally just shut down. And I had chronic fatigue, got my hormones tested. All my hormones were messed up, including testosterone. My testosterone was very, very low. And then my thyroid was off as well. So I got put on thyroid medication. That was November of 2020. And since then, the timeline since then has been pretty downhill. Like the thyroid medication never helped. When I did see a little bit of change, it was because I got on B vitamins. No, D vitamin. I started taking vitamin D. There we go. And that's when I started to notice a little bit of an increase in energy, but it wasn't much. So again, this timeline then was me looking at, okay, it doesn't really make sense. When I go to the doctor, all my levels of everything else are perfect. Like I've always been extremely healthy. I've just been really lucky that way. It didn't really make sense that I was struggling with hormonal issues, with thyroid issues, with chronic fatigue, given everything else. And because I had a chronic issue, I was cutting all the things out of my diet. I was eating superfoods. I was trying to do all the things to help myself, and yet wasn't seeing any change, not with thyroid medication, not with anything. That's when the messages started coming to me to start looking within my body, like to start doing some things to help move stuck energy and trauma that was stuck in my body, which led me to reading The Body Keeps the Score, which led me to embodiment practices, which led me to somatic experiencing, again with Peter Levine, and which led me to nervous system, an understanding of our nervous system. And that is when I started to see a shift. So in the last few months, I've gotten off my thyroid medication. My energy is back. I'm not saying I'm always like I have energy 24/7. I'm in my 40s. So I'm just mindful of when I'm tired, I take rest, but nothing like it was before. Like before, my fatigue was so intense. It was like Aaron had left the building. I had no motivation. My doctor prescribed me antidepressants. I didn't end up taking those, but he thought I was depressed. I had all the symptoms of depression, but I knew I wasn't depressed. It was trauma. It was trauma. So in The Body Keeps the Score, the author talks about how there's a lot of research that has been connected to autoimmune disorders, chronic fatigue, chronic pain, all these sleep disturbances, all of these issues because of trauma. But think about it. Since I was a child, that switch got turned on, right? The switch of fight or flight. Our bodies are not meant to live in these states of stress. They're not meant to be in stressful states all the time. We're meant to live more in a parasympathetic state, which is your rest and digest. And that these sympathetic states, these stress states, we're only meant to go in those, little bits here and there and come out of them. Say if you're getting chased by a bear, you want to go into fight or flight in those moments. But because of trauma, because of early childhood trauma, for many, many years, my body just began to live in a state of fight or flight, which took energy away from my immune system. My body wasn't operating correctly because I was literally in a state of stress all the time, but unconsciously, because I was so used to it. It wasn't like I'm stressed. And I remember I would go to the doctor for different things, like the hormonal stuff, like the adrenal stuff. And they'd be like, well, stress. And I'm like, I work for myself. I work from home. I don't have a lot of stress. They kept talking to me about stress, and I kept going, I don't have stress. But I did have stress. I had stress in my internal system. I was putting a lot of pressure on myself every day. But I was just so used to that I didn't know that was any different. I was putting pressure on myself to be perfect at everything. I was putting pressure on myself to show up in a certain way. I had to look a certain way. I had to be a certain way. I was putting pressure on myself in my relationships, making sure that I did everything correctly, making sure everybody around me was happy. I was putting pressure on myself and stressed out about different things around me. But just like this daily pressure of like, I've got to do more, I've got to do more. Underneath all of that, I could understand eventually with some time. So the first step is always awareness, right? Eventually I understood that I was trying to prove to myself and the world around me that I was good enough, because I really had a deep down feeling that I wasn't, because of trauma. But also, what I didn't know is that my nervous system was perceiving lots of things as a threat, including all the pressure I was putting on myself, right? So I was daily feeding this loop within my system, between my brain and my nervous system, saying, we got to work harder, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to figure this out, all day long. So my nervous system and my brain are just like amped up, and they're constantly in fight or flight. It's like, go. Now, fight or flight looks like anxiety. It looks like being overwhelmed. It looks like being scattered and all over the place. Yeah, that was me. That was me. All day, every day, all over the place. So this is where a lot of compassion comes in, because your brain and nervous system are really just trying to protect you. And my brain and nervous system were just trying to protect me. Because there was so much unknown chaos, like unknown as in I didn't know where it was coming from or what was creating it as a child, my brain and nervous system really have a switch that goes on very quickly to perceive anything as a threat. So going into these states of fight or flight was my body's way of trying to protect me. And oftentimes what we do when we come at it from a cognitive place is we punish ourselves because we think, I'm just not, I'm not manifesting right, or I'm not attracting things to me because I'm thinking negative thoughts. And so we're punishing ourselves with the cognitive understanding, instead of coming at it from a place of love, which is just like, my body and brain love me so much that they're turning on these states to protect me. And we get out of those states by learning to understand our nervous system and what dysregulates us. It's different person to person, but learning to understand what dysregulates you and how you can self-regulate more quickly is the key to healing, and is the key to what I think helped me shift. Now, I'm not going to say that, you take one class in nervous system healing and you're going to be healed, because this is a process. And I had done a lot of the cognitive awareness around the issues that I had, a lot of energy healing before I came to nervous system healing. So that might be why my process sped up a little bit. I don't know. It might just be divine timing, right? But I never want to give somebody the illusion that if you take this one class, like all of your problems are going to go away, because it takes, even for it to be somewhat quick for me. I mean, I started this really like pretty hardcore, I would say, like, I kind of started back in like October, but pretty hardcore, I'd say like March, April to, through July or whatever. But in that time, I was able to get off the thyroid medication. And what I want to report is how I feel now. And I know that there's still work to be done. There always will be. But I had this image yesterday that of like being in an ice cube, like that I myself was in this ice cube and I was thawing. And that's what I feel like happens when you start doing this somatic work. Soma just means body. It's an ancient Greek word that means body. When we start doing the work with our body and understanding the nervous system and the brain and how they work, and then doing the somatic work, the movement and the practices, there's many, vagal toning, somatic work, all of that stuff, embodiment practices, we start to melt, because who that ice cube was. So it's like, think about yourself surrounded in a huge ice cube, right? You're in the center and the ice, so it's like you can see yourself if you look in the mirror, but it's kind of foggy because you can't really see fully through ice. And all of that ice up until you is the conditioning that you've had from growing up, from society, from school, from classmates teasing you. You know, bullying is another way to get traumatized, and I had some of that too. So I really feel like what I went through and the process that I'm going through now, like all the trauma that I've had to go through, and I never want to say my trauma was worse than somebody else's, because, you know, there's people that have way worse trauma than me. And there's people that I have more trauma than. And it's not a comparison here. But I do believe that the trauma I've been through throughout my whole life is to get me to this place that I'm at right now, where I'm able to really serve my friends that are sensitive humans, that have CPTSD, that are looking for answers. They're looking for something more. Like I was looking for something more. I was like doing all the work and not seeing the results. And it wasn't until I started doing this work that I started melting that ice cube, the ice cube of all the conditioning, of all the stories, of all the trauma, of how my brain and nervous system were wired to protect me because of all those stories and trauma. None of it was my fault. None of it is your fault. But we get the responsibility now to do the work to move through that and melt that ice cube so that our true self can come through. And every single day since I've been doing this work, I just feel like a different person. I feel like me, like not a lot has changed in terms of my personality, but it just feels, I feel more joy. I feel more connected to myself. And not just in like a talking kind of way, like I really feel like more love and more joy. That was another thing that I've went through recently. Because of how I was raised with the trauma, like I only just found this out, but I couldn't receive love from people. Like there'd be this kind of like little like I can't even describe it. It was kind of like a little like pushback. Like not from my partner, but like I trust him. I've been with him for 5 years. More so just like definitely with men. I have a lot of trust issues with men, but also with women, unless it's somebody I really know really, really well. There would just, like, if somebody was like, I love you, it was kind of like, oh, I have to say a bunch of stuff because I felt so uncomfortable. I felt like, ugh. I'm doing that because that's where I felt it, like at my heart center. It was just like, ugh, this doesn't feel good. And it's because I couldn't receive, because I couldn't trust what that person was going to do to me. Is this person going to try to hurt me? Because that's what happened when I loved as a child, right? So I'm able to like feel more and to receive love more. Life is just starting to feel easier, and I'm letting more in. More is coming to me because I'm able to hold more. I just feel more like myself. Again, I feel more joyful. I'm giving myself, like I used to, because I work for myself and have for a really long time. And I used to like, again, put so much pressure on myself to get so many things done. And now it's just like, I'm able to go with the flow more instead of being so rigid and like feeling like that all the time. And then feeling overwhelmed and feeling stressed out and feeling frustrated. That's how I used to operate. And I really don't feel those states anymore. when I do get triggered by something, I'm really able to see it clearly and find a way to move through that instead of letting it like take me over and overwhelm me. Those are just some of the things. I'm gonna have to keep kind of looking at, what I have been experiencing, but I just feel different. I feel different. I feel more like myself. And I want more people to experience this, to get over in time. Again, this isn't like a quick fix, but to get over autoimmune disorders, to get out of chronic fatigue and chronic pain, to sleep better at night. That's another thing. My sleep has improved. I'm off my thyroid medication. Yeah, I mean, the list goes on. I'm kind of flabbergasted by how much has shifted for me in this time. But I've also been doing a lot of work on myself. It's been a process. And so I want to share that with you all. And it is something I feel called to share. So because of that, I'm going to open up a workshop. So it'll be next Saturday, August 13th. It's from 10 to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. It is an online workshop. I will be teaching it live at a yoga studio in Cedar Rapids. So if you are in the Cedar Rapids area, I will be at Tula Yoga teaching this workshop, but I'll also be live streaming. So you can attend online and you get the same effects either way. And this workshop, it's called Energy Healing with Erin, but it's going to include movement, some somatic work. So there's going to be some learning. You're going to understand more about about trauma, about the nervous system and how we're wired a certain way based on our trauma. So there'll be some learning, there'll be some energy work. So that's the theta healing that I've been doing for a really long time to help bring some awareness and shift some of those subconscious beliefs, because it's been my opinion and my experience that when I put the two of these together, it's like amazing. Like nervous system work, somatic work alone is amazing, but then you put that with energy healing and it's like, pew. So it's for my friends that have, CPTSD, that are sensitive humans, or a combination of both, that have autoimmune issues like chronic fatigue, chronic pain, any kind of autoimmune stuff, childhood trauma or trauma in general, which we all have trauma to some degree or another. If you get overwhelmed, anxious, scattered easily, if you struggle with anxiety, if you feel like you get stuck in loops, like for a good while, like you're good for a while, and then all of a sudden you kind of find that pattern come up again, like overwhelm or like all the things that we struggle with that I talked about earlier. If you have habits of people-pleasing, perfectionism, and procrastination, one or a combo of all of them, this workshop is for you. If it's really hard for you to make decisions, because you kind of get in confusion land, that was me. I would just get so confused. Well, I don't know if I should do this. Well, I don't know if I should do that. And I would just stay stuck. And if you struggle with core wounds of not feeling like you're not good enough, if you see that come up in different areas of your life, or like you're not important, or like you don't matter, or that you're inadequate, these really shitty core wounds, this workshop is for you. If you're doing all the things, reading the books, trying the different techniques, but you don't feel like things are working, if you're in talk therapy, but you don't feel like that's working, which has been studied, even in The Body Keeps the Score, he talks about that. Like, talk therapy is really not great for people that have CPTSD because you can get re-traumatized very easily. And then the nervous system freaks out, and then we kind of go back into our patterns. So that's why the body work is so important for those of us that struggle with CPTSD. So you're going to leave feeling lighter. You're going to release stress. You're going to understand your patterns more. You're going to start to process and unravel the conditioning that you've taken on in your lifetime. And again, the reason we want to unravel the conditioning is so that the true you can shine through, right? Remember, you're in an ice cube, and all of that ice represents all the conditioning that you've collected over your lifetime, and we want to start to melt that. So that's kind of what this work does. We're going to be doing it from a cognitive level, learning, understanding our patterns, having awareness. We're going to do it from an energetic level, healing energetically through some of the major subconscious programming that I see over my many years of doing this work. And then we're going to do it in the body with the somatic movement and embodiment work. Okay, so it's those 3 levels. And you're going to learn tools I used to heal my thyroid, to get off thyroid medication, to heal chronic fatigue, and the hormonal issues that I had due to trauma. So you're going to learn all of those things. So again, it's August 13th from 10 to 12 p.m. Central Standard Time. It's online, but it's also available live in Cedar Rapids at Tula Yoga. And it's $35. And if you register for this workshop and you decide that you want to do my nervous system reset program that's coming out that I keep talking about, I will take the total, the $35 off of your total for the nervous system reset program. So if you're interested in doing the nervous system reset, I highly recommend doing this workshop to get a taste of what you're going to be diving into on a much deeper level over an extended period of time in the nervous system reset program. So if you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, there's a link in my bio to register for the workshop. Again, it's just $35. It's 2 hours. It's a lot of content. You will walk away, if that's all you do, you will walk away with so much. And then if you want to join me in a deeper dive in the nervous system reset program, I will take that $35 off of your total. So it's kind of like a win-win. You can't lose in that situation. And if you're on Facebook, I will leave a link below for you to register for the workshop on August 13th. I would so love for you to join me. Message me with any questions or leave them below. And thank you so much for those of you that were live. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you got something from this. And let me just see if there's anything else that wants to come through. Anything to leave you with. Just the biggest thing to leave you with just today is to just take notice of where you feel like you get dysregulated, like what triggers you. And then I'll come back and do another live and show you a little way to move through triggers. How about that? So I want you to just take a journal out and just note like what do you know triggers you? So let me give some examples. Like, of course, nothing's coming right now. But for me, it would be anytime anybody's upset with me. Now, that might be a trigger for a lot of people, but a trigger isn't just like, oh, I don't like it when people are upset. A trigger feels like an amped up charge. Like, it almost feels like panic. Give me a thumbs up if you guys know what I'm talking about, where it's just like you feel utterly activated and like almost in a panic state. That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about triggered. Not just like, oh, it's a bummer when people are upset with me. So for me, when people are upset with me in the past, it would just create this rush of anxiety and stress and amplification. Because if you were here for the beginning of the video, you had learned that in my childhood, that my mom was constantly yelling at me or stressed at me about something. And so obviously my nervous system and brain wired that if people are upset, that I'm going to be harmed. So that would be an example of being triggered. Another trigger could be like being in a place that's like really bright, like bright lights could be triggering. Or maybe like when your partner comes home and it's just like, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends, that could be triggering to you because they're like, you feel on some level that they're abandoning you. So I just want you to think about what your triggers are and then come back to my next live. I promise it will be shorter. Maybe I will do that on Monday, and I'll show you how to move through trigger so that you can free yourself of this energy and have more of you back. Remember, thawing that ice cube, that's what it's all about. Okay, so that's your homework, your soul work, as I like to call it, is to look at what might trigger you. Sit and think about it, journal about it this weekend. Just jot a few things down that and then maybe you'll find that you get triggered this weekend. Jot that down so that we know. We want to start collecting evidence of what triggers us so that we have that evidence that we can use to just be more aware when we're in those situations. We know, okay, I need to go take a time out after this. If somebody's upset with me or writes me a nasty email or comment or something, I need to take a break and go, do what I'm going to show you coming up next week. All right, that's all I have to say. This video is getting long, so thank you for watching. Thank you for being here, and I will see you on Monday with ways to move through your triggers. But in the meantime, sign up for my workshop on August 13th. You will not be disappointed. You will walk away again with so much information to move through, to de-thaw that iceberg, and to be more yourself. All right, thanks for watching.